Welcome to Deleted Saves. On this episode, Resident Evil 3 Remake on PS4. There are times when we get a game remake that is not just what we, the game public, expected or wanted, but it may be what we needed. You know, like bad tasting medicine that will save your life. If you don't understand the allegory I'm making, you soon will, as we dive into 2020's Resident Evil 3 Remake. Released quickly on the heels of Resident Evil 2 Remake, as Capcom has been in a remake mood lately, and coming out in the very bad, no good year of 2020, when people stuck in their home trying to avoid catching the new plague of the 21st century. You know, the one that happened 3 years ago, 7 million dead worldwide, spawn of online conspiracy theories, and the major inconvenience of suburban white fuckwads everywhere. Sound familiar? Players had a lot of time to mull over the story and gameplay of RE3 Remake, alongside luminaries like Final Fantasy VII Remake, Doom Eternal, and Animal Crossing New Horizons, of all goddamn things. Of those games, which do you think did the worst publicly? Here's a hint. I'm talking about it now. But before I get into the nitty-gritty of my opinions, let's do an overview of the game itself. Resident Evil 3 Remake is, as it says on the tin, a remake of 1999's Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. The game that came out right after my beloved Resident Evil 2 in 1998, and one that I also played a lot, but not quite as much as the previous game, and mostly because I bought it and I was stubborn, and I kept replaying mostly to find where the fun in it was because I couldn't find it back then. It stars Jill Valentine, Master of Unlocking, and one of the survivors of the mansion incident of the original game, as the last of the STARS team left in Raccoon City along with her pilot, Brad Vickers. The timeline of this game is a bit weird because it takes place in the hours just before Resident Evil 2 and then immediately after it, with Jill having never crossed Leon or Claire's paths. Jill is there for the initial outbreak of the G-Virus, the T-Virus's uglier and nastier younger brother, in Raccoon, and got to witness the fall of the city. Jill is also being hounded the whole way by Nemesis, a monster built from the ground up by Umbrella specifically to hunt down and kill the surviving STARS team members because it has their DNA or something. Anyway, this is an in medias res game, a story already in progress in both the original and the remake. So I'll go from the point of the remake unless I feel I need to call back to the original. Jill is in her apartment, trying to figure out what to do and where to go to get away from Umbrella, when she gets a call from Brad to get out of her apartment right before the wall explodes, and a 7-foot-tall man in black, with a garbage bag over his head, busts in and starts choke-slamming her around the room, in which gunshots to the face have no effect. Jill must escape the monster and her burning apartment complex through a series of dreaded cinematic, not-quite-quick-time events, only to stumble like a newborn fawn into the city already on fire and swarming with the infected. She soon sees Brad, the team pilot who left everyone's asses in the hills of the original Spencer mansion because one of the teammates got killed by zombie dogs on the ground and he panicked and fled, despite being up in the air in the team helicopter when it happened, and he begs her to follow him. Brad seems to be suffering from survivor's guilt as he tries to tell Jill about the monsters chasing them, the big guy with the bag on his head. When they run into a bar, he gets bit by a zombie along the way and chases Jill off to survive where he couldn't. Just so you know, Brad dies in the original too, although a lot less chivalrously and a lot more with piss running down his leg. Jill, left to her own devices in the City of the Dead, begins to run for her life, evading zombies and diving through burning rubble while running out of bullets, only to reach the roof of a car park hoping to flag down fleeing choppers. Nemesis reappears on the roof and begins chasing her again, by which Jill jumps into behind the wheel of a car that looks suspiciously like the one that Ethan drove in Resident Evil 7 a few years before this game, and we get to not quite quick time event drive the car over Nemesis repeatedly until Jill, Nemi, and the car go over the side of a car park and about 5 stories to the ground, which Jill walks away from with minor bruising. Just in case you weren't aware, Resident Evil 3 Remake is not the slow burn creeping in the dark horror of the previous game, but instead a run and gun spectacle event, the kind we as a game's public had gotten well used to in the Xbox 360/PS3 era. Can't keep the kids engaged and spending money on these fucking luxury items unless there's flashing lights and screaming sounds, much like how their parents stayed engaged at the casinos popping up all over the US due to loopholes in the old tribal land laws of the 1700s and 1800s. But I digress. From there, Jill stumbles and bumbles around a roughly 4 square block of Raccoon City, much like she did in the original game, really, evading zombies and gathering resources like bullets, discarded guns from their dead owners, and various things needed to solve environmental puzzles while evading Nemesis, who shows up now and then to earn his name recognition wage. Eventually, she's rescued by Carlos Oliveira, who got the GQ hotness upgrade from his dopey PS1 days character model, and who now looks like a professional cocoa butter salesman from Costa Rica, who is a member of the UBCS, the Umbrella Corporation's version of the STARS team, and who is here to clean up the biohazard mess that used to be Raccoon City at the behest of their bosses. Supposedly, anyway. With only 4 of their original 10-man team left, their leader is planning to use the subway to get out of town with whatever survivors he gather, and needs Jill's help to get the system running and the power back on, which Carlos and another guy go to the Raccoon City Police Department to look for the real object of the mission, an Umbrella scientist named Bard, who must have hidden the cure for this mess. Jill takes a trip down to the city power substation, which is now overrun by creepy bug monsters, to turn the local subway electricity on, and we are entreated to an incredibly uncomfortable scene where one of the bugs decides to throat fuck Jill with its proboscis in an image straight out of your weeb tentacle porn inspired wet dreams and most women's nightmares. And afterward, she flees only to be chased by Nemesis, now armed with a rocket launcher, to kill one person, the very definition of overkill. The two wind up at a construction site where Nemi trades out the launcher for a flamethrower backpack, and the two race to the top while everything catches fire, and Jill and Nemesis battle it out on the partially constructed roof, where we learn that Nemesis is indeed very flammable. Fire indeed hot. Meanwhile, as terrible things are happening to Jill, Carlos and Redshirt arrive at the police station, where we get to see the now zombified Brad bite Marvin Branagh, who Leon and Claire will meet just 24 hours later when he is dying of the bite. And it is Carlos who shoots Brad dead. Not how it ended in the original, but whatever, no one liked Brad. Carlos and Redshirt discover their princess is, in fact, in another castle, as the scientist Bard has fled to the Raccoon Hospital to wait out extraction, worried about the police station being compromised, and having seen the mutating William Birkin around, so wasted side trip. Everyone meets back up at the subway, and we get our first overt idea that the one of these Umbrella cleanup crew, named Nikolai, who is being brilliantly ham-acted by a post-perestroika, post-glasnost Russian mercenary, and for the love of fuck, if you are listening to this and were born after 1995, please look those terms up. I'm not spoon-feeding world history to you. Is maybe a bad guy in capital letters. When the subway takes off, an updated idea from the original, which was some sort of San Francisco rail car, Nemesis arrives and kills everyone on the train until the leader of the mercenaries blows himself and Nemi up, allowing Carlos, Jill, Nikolai, and Redshirt to escape. Jill winds up on a bridge watching Nemesis burn to death, and it rushes into the city's river, only to have it reappear seconds later as a titanic lizardfish, the first of several Nemesis mutations you will have to deal with. The new form chases Jill around and around in a square blocked off by trashed cars and police blockades as it leaps from building to building in the background until Jill brings it down, whereupon Jill gets stabbed by one of Nemi's tentacles and Jill passes out, now dying of the G-virus. Wow, Jill just cannot get away from getting slapped around by pseudopenises in this game. Now, in the meantime, while Jill is unconscious, Resident Evil 2 Remake happens, so you can listen to my earlier review of that one if you like, dear listener. Carlos has her hidden in Raccoon Hospital, looking for Bard and his cure. And Redshirt discovers that Umbrella is planning to wipe out any trace of the cure for the virus it created, and the US government is planning to nuke Raccoon City to wipe the virus out. So holy fuck. How are our heroes going to get out of this one, kids? Well, after a too long stay at the hospital looking for Bard, they find him, only to have him get killed, but not before Carlos gets the cure for Jill, and he gives it to her. She wakes up, and Carlos and Redshirt fill her in on what has been happening in the past 24 hours, and they must flee. Carlos must find Nikolai first, as he is doing nefarious shit in the background, and runs off, leaving Jill and Redshirt to reach the Umbrella pickup zone in an area of town known as the Dead Factory, which is yet another on-site Umbrella lab full of monsters. Jill and Redshirt get there, and he finally lives up to his cultural joke as he gets killed by Nemesis in his second-to-last form of a pustule-riddled massive hellbeast. And Jill must get through more monsters until she confronts Nemi in his last form, all massive growths and wild tentacles all over the place. And Nikolai reveals he's been working for yet another faceless corporation, here to collect combat data and samples of the virus for her. Jill blows Nemi up with a railgun, and Carlos has a quick-time knife fight with Nikolai on the roof of the building until they beat him and flee in a helicopter, just as Raccoon City gets atomized in a government-sanctioned nuclear strike on its own soil. And that's it. As an aside, man, I really wonder how many multinational corporations there are out there as the series goes on, clamoring for the secrets of the T virus, G virus, progenitor virus, the mold, Los Illuminados. Jesus shit already. Nikolai, Ada, Wesker, even eventually Chris. All these and more are trying to sell company secrets to some other company in the business of turning people into monsters of war, a capitalist escalation towards our own global doom. Have the RE devs at Capcom been ham-fistedly trying to tell us a lecture on the capitalist progress of global markets and society and the rise of the military-industrial complex? You know, the thing President Eisenhower, a former U.S. general, warned us about in his farewell address from the presidency, and what some people claim is not a real thing, a period when war becomes business and our business is a war-based economy? Maybe they have. Anyway, Resident Evil 3 features a number of changes and departures from the original, and predictably, the fans of the original got out their little peepees and banged them against their internet-connected keyboards in unbridled fury. Several areas were cut, which, thank fucking God they were, because I thought they sucked in the original. I'm glad they did away with the clock tower and the city park sections and a few other monster mini-bosses that had nothing to do with the story. They were utter garbage and dragged the game out further. Unfortunately, now the hospital takes too long, and they added a zombie siege section. So Christ, they blew it on that one. Also, Jill in the original does go to the RPD, where at some point she recovers some stuff and fights Nemesis, which I kind of regret she didn't do, but it's not like the RPD story in 3 got cut. It's just Carlos and Redshirt who go there, and we get to see what happens to a character from another game. The biggest supposed sin of Resident Evil 3 Remake that players think was a thing was that in the original game, whenever Nemesis appeared, you got a split-second choice of where to hide, mostly, except for a few fight the monster options. Those were removed to focus more on action. Not as much action as, say, RE6, but much more than some fans wanted or liked. Which is kind of funny, because there aren't that many people floating around still who played the original back in 1999, so I guess this complaint comes from the little brothers and kid sisters of the older teens who had a PS1 back in the day and then dumped it on their siblings after they went away to college or the military or whatever and lost interest in gaming. So a bunch of nostalgia geeks chasing a high they could never have again. There was idea of choice somehow, that Nemesis was this perfect predator that could show up at any time and chase them endlessly. But here's the rough fucking truth, folks. He wasn't. There weren't story choices that mattered. And if you did kill him in the original in these choice moments, you got parts for guns you didn't need or extra health sprays. No big world-changing shit. No reveals that would change the nature of the game. They were the illusion of choice in a pretty overall crap side game. Hey, I'll say that again. Resident Evil 3 Nemesis was a side story. It was supposed to be RE2 DLC before we called it DLC, and Resident Evil Code Veronica was supposed to be the third mainline entry in the series. That was until the internal memos within Capcom began to swirl, and the men at the top got cold feet about how Code Veronica would sell with its plot and moving it to a next generation system, in this case exclusively on the Sega Dreamcast. But we all know by now how Capcom thinks about exclusivity deals. So instead, the game added a Mr. X variant as a set piece boss with a few new tricks and the ability to rumble the word stars and asset swap the fuck out of RE1 and RE2, also on the PS1, which is why they were able to get this one out in only a year after RE2 and its blockbuster success. And I hate to tell you, they did the same thing with RE3 Remake in the wake of RE2 Remake and RE7. All asset swapping to pump this one out fast. Nemesis in RE3 Remake is far truer to his original than Mr. X was in RE2 Remake, and I'm fine with that. Other folks weren't, but at this point I've grown far too tired of what some aggrieved asswipes from the public who don't make games and don't know the first thing about how to put two fucking sentences together think of what remakes of their childhood misappropriated memories should be. I am happy to defend the short length of RE3 Remake. In a world of sprawling, overlong film school reel tryouts pushed off as games, and game makers trying to recreate lifelike graphics to the nth degree, and every dude and dudette in their garage trying to make the next indie darling to dump on Steam alongside the porn games, hell, I'll take a game like this. It was almost an oasis of relief in a polarized gaming environment. It was over in less than 10 hours, and it did what it said on the tin. I'm not even going to bother to rehash the limp-wristed, lukewarm, generally favorable reviews tripe that the critics always splash on games these days that aren't the second coming of Christ, and in the hope of being taken seriously as a real professional writer, which of course is what they gave this game, as well, along with praise for good graphics, an updated interface, and moments of tense atmosphere. Players got mad because it wasn't, they felt, replayable. I replayed it and enjoyed it. I've played far more lauded and miserable experiences that I'll never goddamn touch again that these same shitheels say are great and replayable. But again, the original RE3 was a high quality shovelware, and I think the remake did so much better than the original. I'd say that's just my opinion, but fuck you. I'm laying that down as hard fact. And sales may not be what others in the series were, and have almost certainly now eclipsed it. But it was still released and listed as a solid hit, and that is all that matters, I guess. Although I've also loved many games that were flops too, so the reality is it matters more if you liked it, not if the next guy did. You know, I kind of feel bad for the developers after a while. The ones who put in honest effort into a product despite corporate shenanigans and awful work cultures. For the vast majority of creative people, whether they draw, write, paint, play music, act, or what have you, they toil in darkness. They make their stuff for love or money, or if they're really lucky, both, and spend a lot of time essentially begging for the right to exist. No matter what tough act they play off as not caring if they do or don't. Forced to seek approval from the uncaring public at large, or from those elders in the industry that have somehow quote unquote made it and were allowed to be recognized as real and valued by editors and shadowy folks who made big bucks off the labor of others, unless said artist was so superbly talented that they were able to bypass the usual channels of capitalist success and force the public eyes on their work so that Ma and Pa Kittle could get the fucking cheeseburgers out of their mouths long enough to go, "Them's some purty words and pictures." But for most, they have to stand there and eat shit from the faceless mob in the hope that their work will be liked and will give them a few crumbs until the next job opens up. It must be tiring to have to do this after a while, even if you like what you do and believe in the final product. Or if not, and if it's just a job, but now your name is tied to it. I get the idea that's what happened to the RE3 Remake team too, when the general public approval did not meet standard. Or a lot of dev teams, really, who get fired or disbanded soon after a project is done unless it makes more money than the national GDP, and sequels and merchandise can be wrung out of it for more shareholder profits. You can tell me I'm wrong about that, just so long as you were okay with me telling you to drop fucking dead. Anyway, RE3 Remake is a fun little action horror game. Bite-sized, no pun intended, zombie shooting goodness with some dedicated chase mechanics. It's good, even though Jill isn't my favorite character and I don't understand the Resident Evil community's obsession or love for her character. But there are a lot of things I don't understand about fandom or fan worship, so that's neither here nor there. It has far more value as a game than what many other, and I say this with the biggest eye roll ever, valued or important opinions would have you believe. And if you want to see stars, come argue that with me. I'll show you stars. Thank you for listening. Deleted Saves would like to thank Brad, Keith Gasper, and Masked Llama for being patrons of the show. If you would like to become a patron of the show, please go to patreon.com and check out Deleted Saves podcast. All donations go directly towards maintaining the show itself. Thank you.